Welcome to the 5th NFT Subgraph Community Call. So for today, I think we wanted to kick off with a demo. We've got Alex Masmej here from Showtime, and we want to see what you guys have been up to.
Cool. Thank you, Yaniv. Excited to be part of this, and gonna do a quick demo. Okay, let me share my screen. So this is Showtime. So Showtime takes every single NFT on Ethereum, with an opinionated decision on digital art, and really is a social network rather than a marketplace. And so this is the main page. So user spotlights is like people on their profile can spotlight the NFT to the top with a direct link to the website. So like, for instance, this NFT, I can click on it and I can bid on Foundation and it goes straight to Foundation. Same for Zora, OpenSea, and tons of other platforms. I can go to my profile right now and you can see my created, owned, and liked NFTs with the new spotlight feature that we just released today. So like, usually an artist has like one NFT that they promote. And so this is my NFT because I like moonwalking, I guess. Yeah, we have a leaderboard for the top creators ranked by liked and social data that is centralized for now, because we want this to be fast and we want it to really iterate really quickly. But of course, the goal is for everything to go on chain in a decentralized social protocol, but that's for later. And so, yeah, you can filter by collections. Probably a lot of teams here can see their protocol. If you're missing, please let us know and we'll add you straight away. And then user spotlights is like people who spotlighted their own NFTs to the top of their page, which is what we see in the homepage. And yeah, that's a demo of Showtime for now, and latest also top liked NFTs as well. Sorry, latest NFTs that are minted from the top platforms, and then trending NFTs, which are the most liked NFTs. So people and other like famous artists are there. It's pretty cool. So yeah, quick but concise. That's it for me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, very cool. And I guess browsing people's art is maybe a nicer use of time than checking out where people are going on vacation and whatever other kind of things like that.
Trying to move away from Instagram. Exactly. Like I feel like it's just a better model, because sponsored posts on Instagram with the influencer economy is largely benefiting Instagram, right? They are taking most of the profits, and so it's exciting to just trying to make people move away, and hopefully we'll have a mobile version very soon so we can take over the Web2 world.
Yeah, and then it's nice also how it's this like kind of aggregator, and you can browse all of these NFTs, but also like linking out to the underlying platform. So it's a very like symbiotic kind of relationship with the NFT platforms. So very, very cool. And yeah, I think we're getting closer and closer with the Web3 stack, but there's obviously still a lot of work to do with that, this year. And so I think this kind of thing where some of those features, I guess, are implemented in a more centralized way, but I'm sure you guys are keeping a close look at how the stack is developing, and we'll be kind of progressively decentralizing those different features.
For sure, definitely. Yeah, that's the goal. Right now, we just wanted to make a product that people care about, and the NFT is the only things that's decentralized, and that's it for now. But like we're really waiting for even like the NFT itself. We want it to be on layer 2. We want to switch and be able for people to mint their NFT for free and to do all of those actions, so that it can be more than digital art, which is really expensive, but it can be any kind of media. That's definitely where we're going. And so not just like digital data, but like anything has to be extremely fast. And this is why like calls like this are really helpful, because we need to be able to just query Web3 data as fast as possible.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, on that kind of topic of, progressive decentralization, so something that's been on my mind is, how people are storing NFT metadata. I feel like, the NFT spec itself is pretty loose. You can put any kind of like URI for the metadata. The metadata itself can point to images that are stored, anywhere, including, regular HTTP URIs. And of course, the problem with that is that you have then a dependence on those servers to continue to serve the metadata. And I think when people are buying these NFTs, part of the reason they have value is because it's this feeling of like true ownership, and that, you know, the thing is yours, it'll be yours in 50 years. And, you know, I am a little bit scared about kind of the brittleness of, you know, pointing to these HTTP servers for the metadata and for the images. And I think people might find in 5 years, 10 years that their NFTs that they thought were theirs aren't actually there. And so I'm kind of curious how people are, you know, going about solving for that. You know, what are the issues that they've kind of run into building kind of their apps, and if people have experimented with different like storage networks or types of solutions for kind of like, you know, long-term permanent storage.
Yeah, it seems like IPFS is the leading solution. However, IPFS doesn't have an incentivization layer right now. I don't think Filecoin is live or people are using Filecoin. I'm not sure. But so IPFS is there, but still, like, if no one is hosting those nodes, if there's no incentive layer, then this is still susceptible to be taken down. And so that's pretty bad. And then I guess what's funny at Showtime is like we use the OpenSea API, which they use to store on Google Cloud Plus the IPFS. So we technically, like, if the OpenSea API goes down today, Showtime would largely go down. So yeah, like we definitely need to rely on more decentralized parties to host, and also like having an incentivization layer as well, because it seems like it's good to host IPFS nodes, but if they stop hosting those, then for instance, like the Beeple 69 million piece, I think there was some research on it, like is hosted on IPFS, which is great, but I don't think it's like Maker's Place. It's Maker's Place who's like responsible for hosting that. And so maybe someone can correct me, but like we need like some people to like host it in a kind of like altruistic manner, or at least a platform. And so I guess this is the problem right now. And then other than IPFS, I'm not sure, maybe people store NFTs on Arweave or other data storage. I'm actually quite curious about this.
Yeah, I can chat through how we think about this at Foundation. So we use IPFS, kind of like Alex mentioned, as the storage layer. And then I totally agree that like the incentive layer is missing, right? So what we currently use is we use Pinata. They are a pinning service. So we pay them like a monthly bill, and then they go and pin everything for us to make sure things are available. And I think couple notes there, I think that's a layer of abstraction that's necessary for this phase of NFTs. But I think like the future that I think I see happening is like collectors and creators should know that this is happening, right? That somebody needs to make sure things are available, and they should be the ones that take on the responsibility of making sure that asset stays alive. And I think they can do that. We are in talks with both the Protocol Labs team and our Weave team. So like basically like couple things I would push for those teams to like make tools available and make it like very user friendly, so that people can go and like they understand what's happening and they can just go pay for pinning, right? And then I think the second thing here is I think I would love to explore a way to like bake this into the graph as well. It's like, how do we make it so that as part of maybe the indexing process, like we are also having an incentive kind of layer for the decentralized storage being associated with an asset as well. So I think that's something to explore. And then I know like Arweave has their own like there is what we're talking to them about is their bridge, which I'll drop here. There's a free service right now. I don't imagine it'll stay free forever, but you can literally just like hit a post endpoint and pass an IPFS hash, and they'll use Arweave and the economic model of Arweave to make sure it stays pinned forever, right? But then Arweave also has their own native kind of like storage layer. So I think we'll see how things shake up. But right now, IPFS is the canonical standard for the actual storage, and then we got to figure out what incentivization looks like in the long run.
Yeah, so IPFS I think is like strictly better than HTTP URIs. You do still have to deal with the pinning question and the incentivization for storage, but at least if you're using IPFS, you know that if whatever platform goes down, somebody else can step in and ensure that the data is pinned and everything continues to run. And so I think you still have to solve the long-term storage problem, but it's a big step forward. Now, what issues have people run into with that? Because from my understanding, there are still some like NFT platforms that will just use HTTP URIs. Presumably, I think there's maybe two buckets of why they would do that. One is maybe they feel like it loads faster. And so maybe if they have issues, it's like slow to like pull the metadata directly from IPFS, then that's one reason why they would do it. And the second, I guess, is for the style of NFTs where the metadata itself is like mutable. They want to be able to like, I don't know, like return different data, based on whatever params, which to me really also kind of like does kind of change the essence of what it is that you're buying. If it's mutable, if you're up to, it's up to a single server to decide what to serve. But curious if people have run into those issues with performance of IPFS, if they're finding ways to like cache that so that it's like not a problem, and what they think about the more kind of like dynamic NFT use cases.
I'll address the last one first. I think dynamic NFTs might make sense for like collectibles, and kind of one-off projects. But I think it's an anti-pattern for art, more specifically. I think if people do want to add mutability, I know there's conversations in the Telegram. Like maybe it's something where I've seen the pattern. We do this for burn, but like the creator has to also be the owner, and then they could change things. Maybe that would be like one way to do it, but I would make that on chain, so that there's a history of it having happened. I think it's a anti-pattern for there to be like one endpoint, things change under the hood, and then like there's no record of it. I think that's just against the ethos of what we're building towards here. Mm-hmm. But I do like, for example, some collectibles, it's cool to you don't know what you're buying and then they reveal it. That's a cool interaction. Yeah. So I could see that being a use case. But for art, I would lean away from that.
Yeah, agree completely. And then some people in their metadata will actually reference URIs that include the IPFS gateway, right? And I guess that makes it so that the client can be a little dumber and just kind of like, hitting that link directly. But I mean, that also, I guess you could parse that if you knew that it was there and remove it and just kind of have the IPFS hash. But do people see kind of like issues with that? Again, kind of just like hard coding to specific domains?
Yeah, I think the protocol app team would tell us, I'm typing this out right now, but it's like I think this is the format that they would want. Instead of like a HTTPS/gateway/content hash, I think it's like the IPFS, as the protocol, and then the CID after that. And then I know like browsers, they're working on getting more browser buy-in. So like Brave, for example, supports this natively now. They'll let you configure like on the client side which gateway you want to use, but there's also like a safe public default. And then I think over time, I imagine this to get more popular. So I would say like this is the way that we should be storing the like you have the metadata, and then within that, when you're referencing other data from that, it should be IPFS:// whatever the CID is.
Mm-hmm.
And the stuff that includes the gateway isn't like, it's not the worst case, right? Because at least you still have like the QM hash in it, but it's obviously not ideal. I think there's like this, there might be like a class, and I don't know if it's what you're trying to protocol labs about, of kind of like a product that's separate from the NFT marketplaces that may be representative of some kind of like a gallery, where it's some entity that you can pay, some convenient service where you say, hey, I have this NFT and I want you to guarantee you will store and maybe display this NFT in this setting. I don't know where the marketplaces kind of intersect with that, but we're not going to be able to avoid, I don't think, the kind of economic requirements to say, well, someone has to somewhere pay for a hard drive with, bandwidth to actually store this thing in permanent. And I don't know what the best model for that is, but we want that to be decentralized to some degree. And maybe it's one layer above Filecoin or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, there's just no way that that's going to be too expensive, right? I mean, like these things are teeny. If you've got like a megabyte that you want to store for 50 years, I mean, that should legitimately cost like, like under $1 or something, right? And it's just a matter of having like the pieces in place so that you can conveniently pay the dollar, and it can be the creator, it can be the owner. I think it's easier. It's easy to find the payer, but it's the developers have to use the right protocols. Cool. So I wonder if this is kind of something that we want to track in the NFT Subgraph Airtable for the different types of like NFTs, what kind of metadata URIs they're using. I think it's something that we're going to have to deal with as we build these subgraphs. If some of them are just using like HTTP URIs, we'll just kind of leave it to the client, I think, to just kind of pull from there, and we'll just like mark it as unideal. But definitely, I think as an industry, the sooner we can move towards fully decentralized storage and linking, I think it'll really make a really big difference, and we should get there as soon as we can. And then I think it'd be nice to hear from people's experiences. I don't know who here, if anyone has tried using these storage networks, between Arweave, Saya, and Filecoin. I think they each kind of have their pros and cons, but it'd be nice to just kind of like share learnings with the group as people experiment with different ones. So we can all benefit from that learning. Cool. All right, then let's move on to the next agenda item. So last week, we went into pretty good depth on kind of the high level schema for NFTs. We looked at like, contracts and had some great discussion around that. And then I think we broke right before going into more detail about the metadata field itself, and specifically how to deal with different like media types. So Elpizo, would you want to maybe take over and take us through that Google Doc?
Yeah, I'm actually probably gonna have Sam walk through that. Sam, you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Cool. Yeah, I'd have Sam walk through that because I think Sam's been leading the efforts here to figure out what to do with different media types.
Cool. And then I think we also kind of had a discussion, both with Sam and Breck from Zora, about using like a separate JSON schema kind of format for these different media types. So we don't have Breck on the call today, but I think it would be worth either if someone knows how Zora is storing that stuff today, we could take a look at it, or we could leave that for next time. But I think where we generally landed was that we could build some tooling for basically generating the subgraph schemas based on these JSON schema metadata descriptions for the different media types. And I think that's a pattern that I feel pretty comfortable with. And but let's take a look at the latest on the media metadata.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure there's particularly a huge amount more than what we kind of started discussing last week, to be honest. We obviously had a few different options that we would essentially kind of defer to as the kind of like core set of primitive schemas. So kind of like images, video, audio, and maybe like 3D as well, and any other things that we deem as like a primitives. And then using the JSON schema, we can obviously like compose those together by building on top. So platform specific ones can add their own. They can kind of like enrich it with their own specific set of data if they need that. But ultimately, they should always defer to like a base class, right? Like a base schema, like it similar to how it works now. There should always be a minimal viable set of data that you can pull from, and then we kind of like build on top of that. But yeah, I think like it's all like I can share my screen in the Google Doc that I've got open at the moment, but I don't think, can everyone see that okay if I zoom in a bit? Yeah, so I think like I'm very open as to what is contained in these kind of like these primitive JSON schemas. I would be quite happy for people to like, this is kind of like a first draft from my kind of like perspective, but I'd be very interested to see what I've missed and what people think should and shouldn't be there as like mandatory or even optional fields. Image and video are probably like the two probably highest use case, highest trafficked ones, I guess, in terms of like the content that we're seeing at the moment. But I'd be interested to see like audio and 3D and any other primitives that people would see as well. Like I guess one that is missing from here is text, like pure text content. Like if people are actually publishing articles or, you know, stories or whatever it might be, long form copy. So I'd be interested in seeing what that might look like as well.
Is there scope as well for sort of multimedia? So for these to be combined on one token? I don't know if you guys see that at all.
Yeah, I'd be interested to dig into more of that kind of concept.
Yeah, and because this like these are like I think they're great, but they sort of are sort of one file or one sort of file type per NFT, and like I think there's, well, people are doing all kinds of wacky things. So yeah, I don't know if there's scope for a bit more flexibility there.
Yeah, I guess what could always be there is like a references property where it like references other schemas, right? So an array of other schemas if you're referencing like, yeah, videos and images and whatever else might be there. I guess I don't know how it would be constructed to most accurately reflect what else is like in this NFT, if that makes sense. Like how do you reference like the video file, or if it's an image that comes with video, like what's the best and most obvious way of kind of like accessing those reference points and following that chain? But yeah, I think it totally makes sense to like have some way of like referencing other metadata schemas.
Because to kind of get into, like, you could have, because some of these would be general, like the name and creator and those kind of, but then you could have sort of videos, images as sort of arrays.
Yeah.
Where you could have any number of those things sort of composing the artwork.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
This is maybe more, this is not more a collection of art. So is the artwork by itself can be a collection of others, or do we make a clear distinguishing between one artwork and a collection of artworks?
I think it's a great question, because if you sort of take the Beeple Everyday's example, which was 5,000 works of art, is that one file, or could that actually have referenced it, like everything? But yeah, like I don't know if it's an interesting question whether we want to introduce like constraint here or leave that flexibility.
My vote would be keep it simple and flatten it, because otherwise I think like yeah, I'm just thinking through like even how you would index it. It would seem like it would introduce some complexity on like, okay, is this a single metadata file referencing one asset, or is it one referencing a bunch? And then I would say in the case where a token wants to reference like a bunch of different assets, you could probably do it on the contract and have different fields that reference a bunch of like token URIs.
You could definitely get into some like recursive self-referencing loops here as well, where one references another, which references another, and then yeah, don't know if that's good or bad.
Could be kind of interesting, but yeah, I definitely see the bad side potentially.
I think keeping the kind of default standard thing very, very simple and saying like, this is a picture, you know, here's a couple sizes of the picture, that's fine. You know, we're not excluding the option to say, oh, I want some weird fancy kind of artistic through code, you know, self-referential NFT. You're like, cool, you can go make your own subgraph for that if you want, and you can go, you know, signal on that if that's really a thing you're into. But we want the standard to be something that is like low effort and can be kind of, you know, programmed into various markets, and just say, okay, yeah, click this button, you know, give us 3 images, and then we can generate all the kind of metadata necessary, and it's really easy to use, I think. You know, the 99% use case, but we still leave the option open for, you know, okay, you want to go be weird, fine, but that's going to be more work.
Agree with that.
Cool.
I think in the chat, I think Ryan brought up traits. I think that is something that people are putting in the metadata. is probably, I don't know what the format for that is, but I know it's much more common with like game NFTs, for example, and like collectibles. But we should bake that in natively. I think it's pretty common.
Yeah, the spec on that's pretty open. Like you can look at hash masks is one example where you have these like different figures, and then those figures have different attributes or they have different collections of items around them. But it's largely just these arrays of like key value pairs. And then ideally you have a count of how many total NFTs have that trait within a contract. And then you can get like 5% have this, which give it some value.
Yeah, I don't know if the OpenSea team is in here today, but like someone linked to their URL. That one has a good spec for how to handle like attributes.
I think they do the percentage of NFTs that have a certain traits in OpenSea. That's what they made in their own database. So they index and then they calculate it. So it's not on chain. You can derive it if you watch the chain. But it's maybe something that the graph can do.
Yeah, you could definitely do it on the indexing side.
Cool.
So would every image NFT have traits, or I guess it would be like a type of image?
Yeah, I guess there's a couple of ways you could do it. So you could either, I would err on the side of like the base schema having almost nothing that's optional, because I think then like everything can be optional if like one or two things. So I would say that like maybe a base schema of an image has a subset of these things, like what we attribute as like being mandatory and like you can't do anything without these things. And then, yeah, maybe there could be a composed version, which is like more of a, like trait image or like, whatever you would call that thing, which would be a separate schema, but it would essentially inherit or be composed with the base schema and then one that enhances it with traits and attributes and that kind of subset schema. Yeah, and then maybe, going back to the referencing one, maybe there could be a set of like a referencing set of schemas, right? Where it's like the base one can be composed with other subset or compositions of other different ones.
Yeah, actually, Sam, if you scroll down, I forgot who it was, but I think what we can do is maybe drive towards like the actual graph schema here. So like I think someone has created the interface, generic metadata, and I think this is based off what you had on above this, Sam.
Mm-hmm.
And basically it's just like we can just figure out, okay, what goes into that interface and what goes into specific media types.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like the straw man. I don't remember who put this into the doc. Maybe whoever did that wants to talk through it. If they're on the call. If not, it seems to me the straw man is like things like resolution is not in like default in these, which makes sense because you're not going to have it for every asset or media type. But then you do have name, description, image. Those are the current standards. I think we're adding the creator date, created date, which I actually think those can probably live on the token and not the metadata, but open a discussion on that. And then MIME type definitely should be in the metadata. And I don't remember what the original URL is supposed to reference. But I think things missing here is definitely like traits and attributes, probably something that we can add into here.
Yeah.
Traits and attributes being for specific types of like image metadata. So
no, it would be for like the game NFTs that have like this one character has like a sword, or like this one one hash mask is like Hawaiian or something like that.
But yeah, so that's a different type that's maybe even different from an image. It's like a collectible metadata.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so then I had a quick question. I'm not sure if that's to be included in the metadata or not, but like a thumbnail picture like OpenSea API is doing, which is really cool because things like NFTs are mostly videos, right? And it takes such a long time to load because it's heavy files. And so OpenSea, like I think on their API, I'm not sure if it's automatic from them or if people can upload thumbnail images, but they do that. And it's so good for us because we display tons of NFTs and we look at for the thumbnails first so that you can just like load a full preview. I'm not sure how it fits here.
I think that would kind of fall into like a resolutions or like different sizes, right?
like
So there'd be an array of objects.
Got it.
Someone on the call last week was talking about different like video codecs and what they found worked fastest from a performance standpoint. Does anyone remember?
I think that was Sam from Glass, is it? I had a follow-up call with him after. So yeah, it's something that we're obviously dealing with at Foundation as well, and I imagine many other people dealing with lots and lots of video files.
Yep.
So one of the kind of like issues is MP4s are an extremely generic kind of container format. Like what is inside of that MP4 could be compatible on everything or compatible on nothing, but it'll still show up as a .mp4 file. And so validation of whether that plays natively in a browser is extremely difficult and just like fraught with issues because the internal codec is what actually determines whether the browser supports it or not. And so there's a lot of work that needs, oh, sorry, someone's putting their hand up.
Cool. I guess, yeah, like resolution for an image is a good like stop thing for now. And it's good. Okay.
Hadrian, did you have a point?
Yeah, I had a comment. It was not about video format. I'm sorry. It was more about what you discussed with trades just previously and the OpenSea standard. And I think trades goes much further than just collectibles. And like you could use a trade to say that this character has a sword, but you could also use trade as just a key value stored, saying this key has this value. And the advantage of traits as they are used by OpenSea is that it's extremely generic. You can use any keys and any values you want that are relevant to your asset, basically. And this makes me think that here you are thinking about specifying the type depending on what the asset is. For example, adding or not adding a resolution field. And I think resolution is definitely what I would call a trait. Basically, it's something that is optional that you can have or not have depending on your asset. And rather than standardizing an interface where, well, you've got creators or you don't have creators, you've got resolution or you don't have resolution, my view right now is that maybe it would be much more relevant to have just an array of traits, so a key value store completely abstract, and have recommendation on which keys should be used.
On to that, I think maybe Sam, you're going to pull this up, the metadata standard from OpenSea.
Mm-hmm.
If you click into that and scroll down to their traits or attributes, I guess is what they call it.
What do you actually use the different resolutions for? Is that for like thumbnails versus like the full thing, or is it for like different devices?
I think it's both. Is like what Alex mentioned for a thumbnail, like the kind of while you're loading, you load that like image first. And then I think for us, like we use different qualities on different surfaces. Like we have these cards, right? They'll use maybe slightly lower quality. And then the full artwork page is like a larger one. But I think what Hadrian is mentioning is like basically leveraging this as a generic way to like have anything that is non-standard. We can kind of stuff into here, right? So the trait, maybe for resolution is like trait type resolution low, and then there's a value. The only thing we would have to figure out is typing. I imagine the value you can default to like string, and then there's one more field inside the attribute that's like the type trait, like it'd be like the typing for the value. So even here you're seeing like mouth surprise, that's a string, level 5, that's a number. So I think that's the thing you'd have to resolve.
what would be the guideline for when something becomes an attribute? I guess the point is that it's optional and different NFTs would want to implement it differently. LPs, I mean, it sounds like the reason that you kind of put resolutions at a higher level is because you feel like it really should just be a standard that every NFT adopts, because this is something that kind of like, regardless of what type of NFT it is, people need to display it. There's going to be some kind of a graphical element, and the more people standardize on it, the better.
Yeah, I think that's the original thinking, at least. But I'm open to exploring what it would look like in here. I think then you would just have to standardize like the key, like how do you describe what thumbnails are, or like what resolution gets passed in.
Yeah, so Hadrian, can you share why you felt that it's better to not, I guess, standardize on that?
Well, I mean, I agree with you on that, and I would even go further to say that maybe even the compulsory entries like creators could even be tracked. One reason, my first idea is that it's backward compatibility with OpenSea. I mean, it might not be a real argument, but at least like what exists right now would be compatible out of the box, and I think this is a good point. Also, the thing is that obviously keys will have to be standardized for some keys, and the idea is that the set of keys is something that will be partly standard, partly non-standard, and this standard can grow with time. If we realize that at some point we need an additional field, it's very easy to say, hey, the JSON type doesn't change, it stays the same interface. However, what does change is that in this set of key, we add an additional standard entry in this set of keys. And basically this divides the standard into two parts, and the part that is about parsing remains the same, even though we can extend the type about key definition, the standard about key definition.
I don't know if I buy it. You know, I think that, you know, the schema is going to be best when it's really semantic. And I think that kind of like, you know, the philosophy behind the graph and like these schemas is like, you want to have rich metadata, you want it to be available in the schema, you know, and it's structured data. And I think that, you know, one, I'm not sure that like backwards compatibility with other APIs should necessarily be a design goal, because I feel like ultimately like there is a translation process, you know, there is like an ETL. And so I think it's okay that it ends up being different. And so, you know, philosophically, it feels to me like the more we can create, you know, structured data that creates a convenient API, that is preferable. And to me, this type of pattern should be specifically when the structure of the metadata is unknowable, right? Because I feel like there are times where it's just like purely dynamic. And then you basically, the schema itself needs to basically say, hey, this is dynamic. But if that's not the case, then I think using, you know, structure and schemas is the right tool.
One very quick thing is, when I was thinking about backward compatibility, I was not thinking for Subgraph users of developers. I was more thinking about NFT developers. Basically, someone that has an NFT that has structured metadata, they may want this metadata to be readable by the Subgraph and by OpenSea. This is the people that would benefit from this backward compatibility. Also, and again, this is a way of how you like to build your subgraph and how you like to query it. But I still think that using the where clauses and all that kind of fancy GraphQL queries, it's still possible to extract standard keys entries from a key value store that is generic.
Yeah, so here I guess we maybe separate the standard at the contract level and the subgraph level, right? Where I think it would be fine to have like metadata that, I guess like you're saying, if you want to be compatible with OpenSea, which of course they're a large consumer, then maybe that is a reason to structure the on-chain metadata a certain way. But I guess that doesn't mean that it needs to be the same schema for the metadata in the subgraph.
I think regardless, I think there probably is value in having like subgraph entities for these attributes, so you could index them for older NFTs. It's just, I think the question is like whether or not you pull things like resolution top level or try to stick it into this like way of doing it. So I think it's like these attributes should probably be indexable. Like you should be able to parse like metadata, and then you should be able to have like on the the metadata entity, you could have like, here are the attributes and as an array, right? But then I think the question here is more just like, okay, for thumbnails and resolutions, does that belong in here? Or is it top level? And we like basically say everybody should declare like what your thumbnail is and what your resolutions are.
Yeah, I tend towards that direction, but we can, you know, carry on the conversation maybe in the Google Doc if people want to share more comments there, and maybe over time we find better places for discussion for these breakout things. But okay, I'm curious to just go back to the video thing, because I feel like that's something that a lot of people are going to be dealing with. So Sam, were there any more learnings then basically on an improvement to using MP4s?
So loading up MP4s as MP4 files themselves is pretty heavy in most browsers. Like browsers are not great. Like if you're imagining you're loading a grid of like lots of videos that represent NFTs, pulling in the like .mp4 file from like static storage, even if it's like at a high availability like Edge, like CDN, it's extremely like heavy on the browser. Chrome is like starting to handle this pretty good in terms of like they actually lazy load videos past the kind of scroll point. But it is browser specific at the moment. And if you want to start lazy loading in other browsers that don't support that natively, or if you don't lazy load, you'll start to see all the kind of like telltale signs of high memory usage. Like the fans will spin up, everything will start to creak a little bit. So what a lot of the industry is moving towards is streaming. So you're essentially streaming a static file. You're not streaming like a, you know, televised vision or anything like that, but it is essentially a looping video. And that is a lot more kind of like memory efficient in the browser. And it allows you to have many more kind of like videos playing in one kind of viewport at a single time. There's a couple of main things to that. There's HLS, which is one format, and Dash, which is another format. HLS is the one that is supported by Safari natively, but everything else needs to use like essentially like a polyfill browser to support that. It's essentially kind of like moving to a point where you are like streaming chunks of data in a much more kind of like performant fashion. One thing that you still have to then deal with is like, what is the infrastructure that backs that? Like it's obviously very easy to just pull an MP4 file directly from a CDN because it's just a file that you're dumping in it, or from IPFS for that matter. But pulling the kind of like the HLS formats, which are actually kind of split out in a very different format called like I think it's like a manifest file that has the chunks, and each chunk contains an array of different qualities, and that is determined by the browser and the using some heuristics in your browser based on like internet speed, computer speed, etc. So there's a couple of services that do that. There's Mux is one service that does streaming natively, and you kind of transcode it on their side and then serve it at that. And then there's also things like Cloudflare Stream, which does the same thing, or you can do it yourself.
Yeah, really fascinating. So HLS stands for HTTP live streaming.
That's correct, yeah.
And I am curious about, you know, how we could add support for something like this in the graph. You know, I feel like the graph does kind of have the opportunity to be this kind of like edge cache as well, right? It's like indexing and caching already for like, you know, the data that you're querying, and no reason why a graph node, you know, wouldn't be able to like serve this up. And I wonder, it sounds like, so HLS is its own protocol, or when you say it's like supported natively in Safari, the same way that like HTTP or WebSockets, like it's like a top level protocol, and then the polyfills over, do you know if it's like over WebSockets or something?
So essentially what happens is yeah, so Safari HLS is actually created by Apple. It's like a standard that they created and have like opened up to us, you know, given like a permissive license. Dash is a separate kind of format that is as well kind of like probably much more open and was created kind of separately outside of like a single company. Yeah, essentially it acts as a different protocol, and all that happens, all that's happening with the polyfill is it's just a small library that essentially kind of like understands the M3U8 file format and just understands how to kind of parse it. So it's still just pulling it over like HTTPS, but it understands how to actually parse it, whereas Safari obviously has that parsing built into the browser.
Got it. So it's still HTTP. It's chunking the files and it's requesting it in smaller chunks, so you can start playing before the whole thing loads.
Exactly.
Cool. Yeah. So do you know who's using this in prod yet? And you have any kind of, I don't know, benchmarks or experiences to report?
Yeah, we at Foundation use HLS streaming. That's how we kind of like pull in our various video files to display them. I think, yeah, we kind of like, to my point, like we realized that lots of videos playing in our cards, like our artworks page, where there's a high density of videos all playing at once, we saw that there's a lot of kind of heavy load that was being put on the browsers, and people were starting to notice that, like, you know, fans spinning up, and it's like not a great experience for them. So we looked into other things, and streaming definitely seemed to like be a better way of handling that. It gives you a much better, you have some control in like what quality is served to the end user. So you can say like use one of the lower manifests maybe for like small viewing sizes, where maybe kind of like speed over quality is more important to you. But you can also, the browser itself will kind of determine which kind of quality version it should be using. And for us, like, we obviously want, you know, at Foundation, we want it to be the best. We want it to be treated like a gallery, right? So you expect it to be seen like you were visiting a gallery and viewing a piece of art in the real. So we want the fidelity to be as accurate as possible and closely representing that. And so, yeah, we're doing a lot of work working with like looking at different providers and different kind of ways of providing like the best quality, and making sure that that kind of ends up to our browsers. But it's been working well so far.
And I can say, I think that the Foundation gallery experience is like the smoothest of like any NFT gallery I've seen. So I feel like y'all have done a really great job with this. Do you take those chunks and upload it to IPFS, I guess, for whatever this encoding is for these files, or like at that point, if you have to use a service for HLS, do you have to just kind of like point to their, I guess, URLs?
Yeah, so we're doing it so that when the kind of original asset is uploaded, we obviously store that original asset in its kind of original format on IPFS, so that it's forever decentralized and, like, you know, kept there. But then we take a copy of that and transcode it into an HLS format, and that is essentially what gets served immediately to the end user when they're visiting our pages. But you can go and view the original source file if you want to.
And what's linked in the NFT metadata? Both?
No, just the IPFS.
Okay, so you're able to
source.
kind of construct, is it like on the UI based on the IPFS file, you know how to construct the link to like go get the video file from the IPFS hash?
So we store it in our database, like as the kind of like the playback ID.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Cool,
I think the way our mental model has been, like, we make a distinction between like what's canonical and on chain, and that's kind of like what people are trading and collecting. And then I think the rendering layer right now is centralized, which I think it seems like is the same across the board. I think the world I would love to get us to is like, for example, like LivePeer is a decentralized like video infrastructure. I would love to get to a world where like we can also decentralize the rendering side. But right now it's just like there's like not decentralized bills people are paying, and, you know, like there's a there's centralized bills people are paying and centralized services people are using for rendering. And so I think it's tough to put that on chain right now and put that on subgraphs.
Yeah, well, one piece at a time.
One piece at a time, yes.
Cool. All right. Did folks have anything else they wanted to make sure that we covered today?
I think there's a large topic of licensing, but that is probably far beyond what 4 minutes is going to cover in any useful way.
My hot take on licensing is like, if you put that on chain, it'll give people an excuse to come after, like there'll be legal disputes. So I'd prefer to just be like, this is anarchy on the blockchain, and you could litigate on the application layer. That's my hot take. I don't know people's reactions to that.
It'd be
Yeah,
cool.
and then I feel like also like very quickly, yeah, but maybe on another call, or maybe that's not useful related to the graph, but NFT royalties is a very big deal. And I think once, you know, this short-term bubble of selling art is popping, which probably will in the next few weeks, or is already, I think. I feel like royalties is really important. And I'm not sure if there's anything the graph can do to support those, but like, it's a thing that we're thinking about a lot at Showtime.
Yeah, it's something Alpizo's talked about before, right? The kind of creator fees.
Yeah, I think standardizing the way those are consumed, like surfaced and then consumed, is going to be important.
Yeah, like for instance, I think on Zora right now, the creator fee is only to the creator. And we are thinking of other ways to give the royalties than the creator. Maybe like a pool that, like, you know, fans of the creator could benefit from, or things like this. And so, yeah, that's like more like a protocol level rather than like the curing. But anyway, just like,
I think if we do, I think if we do a good enough job of standardizing the way the sale events are emitted and indexed, and the way the fee events are emitted and indexed, then I think downstream, like, consumers can construct whatever, you know, like whatever additional patterns they want. So like the show times, the upshots, like if there's a way to report, like, these are the sales that happen, these are fees that happen, and then you guys can build on top of that.
nice. On top of the foundation smart contracts.
Anybody that's like using that standard.
Okay. Well, I don't know,
And then
because Greg told me yesterday that you couldn't make it so that the creator fees goes to the to someone else in the creator.
Yeah, that would have to happen on the contract level.
Yeah, right now, so our contract doesn't support that use case, but the API for reading fees that OpenSea suggested, and I think Rarible originally put out there, is flexible for that. So it returns a array of addresses and array of basis points to send each of those addresses. So for a use case like what you're talking about, instead of one of the addresses being the creator themselves, it's going to be a contract that's representing that creator and fans that help them get there. And then that contract will accept the funds and can redistribute as appropriate.
Okay, cool. So it means that if I were to release that feature, it would not be the address where the NFT is minted. It would be like a contract that then has those as like an umbrella contract.
Yes. So the NFT contract will, hopefully, we want to standardize how fees are communicated. But the NFT contract's going to communicate where fees go and how much fees to collect. And where that goes can be another contract that adds a bunch of logic.
Yeah, Jordan said, is the contract publicly available? Like, I know we have to cut this call, but like really interested in this.
We don't have it open source, but I think we're actually just building off, I'm trying to find it from, we're just building off the OpenSea kind of like proposed standard. We can drop it in the doc, because I think we actually have it.
Cool. Yeah, I'd love to check it out.
It is in the doc already, but if there's questions, just add comments and we can take a look at that.
Yeah, people scroll to the fee section of that doc, the OpenSea standard. There's a get fee recipients and get fee like BIPs. Like that's what Nick is talking about.
Cool.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. We're at the top of the hour, but another really great NFT Subgraph call. So thank you all for making it.
Well, thank you, Yaniv. Thank you, everyone.
Cheers.